as the trial did continue here, we actually heard Jennifer Crumbley take the stand for 2 days of testimony there. Want to talk about all of that, so let's bring in Jamie White, a trial attorney in the state of Michigan, joining us now live to talk about this. Thank you so much for taking the time to be here with us this morning.
Of course.
All right, so first off, I do want to talk about Jennifer Crumbley's testimony there. You were watching this. What stood out to you the most? Again, we're talking about 2 days worth of testimony.
Putting her on the stand was extremely risky to begin with. I was shocked by that. I know Shannon Smith. I've known her for a long time. We've worked on opposite sides of many a case. It was a big gamble on her part, but I would have to say that I think she made the right choice. I think that Ms. Crumbley came across as relatively genuine. She didn't come across as someone who just had no concern for her child, and I think Ms. Smith was able to bring that out. I thought some of the testimony was completely irrelevant when it came to her extramarital affairs and her horse farm and some of these other really character assassinations on the attempt of the prosecutor. But overall, I think Ms. Crumbley had a positive effect. She certainly didn't hurt herself up there, in my opinion.
And that was going to be my next question, because that's always a question when you're talking about a defendant taking the stand, is whether or not they are going to help or hurt their case. So you would say overall, she definitely didn't hurt it.
That's my assessment, Josh. And I think, what was unique about this case and what is unique about this case really isn't about facts. This isn't about who robbed the bank, right? This isn't about who sold the drugs. This case is really a legal question. And that is, are we going to hold parents responsible for the third-party actions of their children? And if we're going to do so, under what circumstances are we going to do that? And that's a legal question, not a factual question. So putting her on the stand was risky because sometimes the jury can get caught up in some of the salacious evidence that they were successful in presenting. But at the end of the day, the real question is whether or not parents can be held responsible for the behavior of their children. And we've heard this question before in Michigan in particular, just not in the context of a school shooting.
Why the charge of involuntary manslaughter?
So, there's multiple levels of homicide charges in the state of Michigan, and they're relatively comparable all throughout the nation. The highest levels, of course, first and second degree murder, require some level of malice or premeditation. And then when you get into manslaughter and involuntary manslaughter, the argument becomes you didn't intend to kill anybody, but your behavior was so grossly negligent that it led to the death of somebody to an illegal point of view. And so what the prosecutor is saying here is, sure, she didn't know her son was going to shoot anyone. She didn't know her son was going to shoot up the school. However, a 15-year-old who, at least demonstrated some troubling behaviors and past behaviors should not have had access to a weapon, not only because of his conditions and his history, but really in regard to his age. And in effect, his parents were straw buyers for this weapon. And I'm a gun owner, and I'm not taking any positions on that issue, but I think the prosecutor, I think that fact pushed them to make this ultimate charge of involuntary manslaughter.
And I want to ask, just based on your opinion, your observances, you have been watching the trial kind of play out there in Michigan. Which way does it appear the jury is going to go? Is there any way to really know?
Well, first of all, Oakland County is a conservative community. It's a relatively wealthy community, highly educated community. And the power of reasonable doubt is very, very powerful. And I thought Ms. Smith did a good job of laying out the different standards in her closing as far as what was required of the jury under these circumstances. And I think that at the end of the day, there's been a frustration in our community. This is the second mass shooting that we've had. We had one at Michigan State University not long ago as well. And I think there's a frustration all over the country that has led to these creative responses since the Congress and the legislature appears not willing or able to address this. So The jury has some difficult decisions to make, but I do think this is going to be a challenge to get a conviction in this case based on the facts of the way I heard it. I think this woman was irresponsible. I think many parents are irresponsible, but at what point do we start sending people to prison for what I would call unpredictable behavior on the part of their children?
And circling back to something we were talking about in my first question here, this appears to really be the first time that a parent has been charged for their role in a school shooting that was carried out by their child. So my question, whatever happens here, does it kind of set a precedent?
Well, there's no doubt if there is a conviction, this will be appealed at the state court level, at the highest court level. And, obviously we're dealing with First Amendment right issues and Second Amendment right issues. So we have not heard the last of this, if there's a conviction of any sort. But yeah, this is very, very unique. And I think that whatever the outcome is, Josh, I think that parents are going to take a second look at the accessibility to their weapons and maybe some of the commentary they're making that are troubling. I mean, again, it's important to keep in mind that this happened hours after the family was notified by school authorities that they had concerns, and there was no action taken by these parents. And had they done just the simplest thing as getting that firearm out of his possession, I believe these four young people would still be alive.
How does whatever happens during her trial impact her husband's trial? Is it likely that possibly does he get a plea deal or something of that nature if she is found guilty, or if she's found not guilty? What can we expect to happen as a result of this trial?
That's a great question. Anytime you separate defendants, as they did in this case, the second party to go is paying very close attention to the outcome. If she's acquitted, I expect the prosecutor to probably offer him a very reasonable plea deal. And I would say, even if she is not convicted, I think that the prosecutor ran into some challenges in this case that she did not anticipate.
Yeah, it's one of those cases that so many people are paying attention to here. Why do you think that is? Why do you think it's capturing this nationwide attention?
Well, I think that we've all been scrambling, whatever side of the gun issue you're on. I think we've all been scrambling with, what is this pandemic in our country? Why is our country the only country where children are showing up in school and killing their classmates for no apparent reason? And there have not been any answers. There certainly are a lot of talking heads that have suggestions, whether it's video games or music and so on and so on. But as far as a fix, politically, I think that people are scrambling for it. I can tell you we've seen it in my own home community, which is not far at all from where this Crumbley trial is taking place. Fortunately, there was no incident, but there was a scare. And the reaction in our community was robust. But it was also very perplexing to people because their hands were up in the air and they didn't know what to do. So I think that this case, it encapsulates so many things, but I think most importantly, how do we protect our children in their schools? And this should not be a question that should be extraordinarily difficult to answer, but apparently it is. And I think the prosecutor's taken on a tough case, but I suspect that there's some motivation to try to address this issue in a legal capacity.
All right, Jamie White there, trial attorney over in the state of Michigan. Thank you so much for taking the time to be here. Anything else you want to add about any of this before I let you go?
Yeah, I just hope that whatever the outcome is, that people will trust the system. It's important that we don't get into a situation where this becomes political guns, anti-guns, and that sort of thing. This is a legal question, and I've already addressed what that is. I mean, do we hold third parties accountable for their behavior when you are the legal guardian under certain factual circumstances? And the jury is going to answer that question, and I hope people will respect it. There does appear to be some animosity that's been put forth towards counsel on both sides, and that's unnecessary and it's inappropriate, and it gets in the way of due process.
All right. Thank you again for taking the time to be here with us and break this down, a case that so many eyes are on. And we know the jury will begin deliberations on Monday, so we'll see what happens. Thank you again for taking the time to be here with us.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me, Josh.